On this episode, we are going to pull the OMC Cobra out. And as I discussed in the prior episode, the reason being is we have this cracking around where the motor mounts are, and we needed to do a better job, right, of sealing that and probably using some 1708 bi-axial. If you haven't seen that before, you'll get to experience that. Probably not in this episode, but you'll at least be able to get acquainted with it. First things first is I needed to get that stern drive down. I was able to look around inside the motor and find where this little black and white connection was, and I plugged it in. And I tested it a little bit off camera to make sure it actually works. And I'll tell you what, it's got a little bit of air in it, but let's see if it's working. Yeah, it's pretty good. Let's go ahead and lower it down a little bit more. There's definitely no question of whether or not that pump is working. All right, yeah, looks pretty good. Let's jump out of the boat and make sure it's lined up enough where we can start pulling those nuts off. You've all seen me remove the stern drive multiple times, and I've got videos for it. If you're curious on how to remove the stern drive, link me in the comments field below and I'll show you how to remove it. It's pretty easy. I've got tons of videos on the exact process to do it efficiently and easily, and also it'll go over what happens if you run into it where the stern drive doesn't come off. But I've kind of taken that part of the video out of this episode just because I've got so many of these videos where I pull the stern drive out. Anyway, let's go through the mold here and start prepping the motor itself. You need your heavy duty chain and all your connecting points ready. You need to get your hoist and everything going as well. I'll hop back in the boat here. And when I say the connecting points to lift this motor out, that is one, and then this is the second one. If you opt to use that one, you are definitely going to run into some problems. You'll probably end up breaking that thermostat housing right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and just first start getting some of these connections undone, the electrical connections, that is. There's grounds in the back. We need to disconnect the hydraulic pump. That needs to get disconnected as well. And then we'll go through and probably disconnect this guy, this little blue connector that needs to come out. And we'll be that much closer to getting this thing rocking and rolling here. You can see we've got the chain hooked up at this point. We also have the motor mounts in the back removed, and we have the bolts, the lag bolts in the front removed as well. So this effectively is ready to go. If you have any questions or concerns on how to get the actual engine removed itself, let me know. I've got an actual video on how to do it, so I'm not trying to spend a crazy amount of time on this video series showing you how to do it. There are some best practices that I have, and even how to get the hoist set up and everything like that. I can point you to those videos if you need it, if you found yourself to this video, because I do have a more detailed video that shows like all the stuff that you got to remove. But for some of my viewers who have already been on the channel and they've seen it, I'm not going to rehash it on this one. So anyway, let's go ahead and start ratcheting this motor up and out of the way here so we can get it out of the boat here. Okay, so we got the motor suspended now. Everything looks pretty good. We've got all the battery cables disconnected, all the wires in the back disconnected. Motor looks pretty darn good. So I'm gonna go ahead and move the trailer forward, and then I'll let this motor down a little bit lower so we can effectively work on this thing and start looking at the damage to the motor mount areas. Take a look here. No more motor, huh? Pretty nifty. You can see already why it is that I opted to take the motor out. And that's right here. The fiberglass is starting to come apart, and it's hard to say why. It could be In my opinion, it's probably because of the motor mount here, because you can see this is a spot where it likely started flexing here and then opened up further this way, and then it spread all the way to right next to where the shift cable goes over here, and then kind of stopped around that corner. Now, I was thinking about pulling the exhaust off, but I'm still going to inspect it. It looks like, yeah, it actually is splitting down there as well. So I may end up having, let's see if it's splitting back here. Oh yeah, and it's starting to split. It looks like it actually stops right next to where this exhaust piece is. All right, well, at this point, you know, it's just kind of, we're gonna have to play detective here and basically keep removing things until we have a full picture of what all is damaged here. And it looks like what we're gonna have to do is, this is gonna be the next thing to come off our exhaust pipe. It's a good time to check and see if you have any flappers that are stuck. You can see here the flappers are gone. Grab my marker here. What we'll likely do, you can hear that, that's the device that measures the water content, the beeping noise. We're actually going to use that here in a second. But we'll probably stop about right there and cut. And then we'll slice, I'm thinking all the way over here, if not probably further. But either way, I can't get my marker in there, it's too far. We're gonna have to pull that exhaust out. Hoping I didn't have to, but upon further inspection, it looks like I'm gonna need it. Let's look to the right. Why is the right not having an issue, whereas the left does? And the clue to it may be the buildup here. You can see, if you see these little woven striations in here, that's 1708. Whereas if you look on the top, you see all these like random, right? That's just chop strand. Now, if you want a demonstration of what these look like, here, that is chop strand. It's just fiberglass randomly put together, and it becomes a little mat. It's not very thick, but that's typically how most people cover the their decking. And then around structural joints, you know, stringers and things of that nature that need a little bit more strength, they'll use this, which is 1708 bi-axial. It has chop strand at the bottom, woven into actual strands of fiberglass. This is very strong, and you can see this is what was used, like right here. And then it's likely, because these are like, I have to check, but these are likely run in like 6-inch sections at most. So probably terminated about here, and then something was run along this edge. Whereas on this side, you can see the bi-axial was 6 inches. It started here, stopped, and then this became a weak point. I can see a little bi-axial here, but it looks like it never rolled along the corner. Yeah, you can kind of see. So that's something to keep in mind as you're rebuilding. Sometimes make sure that you have a your 1708 rolling around, especially areas like where you know your motor mounts are going to be. There's going to be a lot of shaking. Let's take a look here. What do we got? Do we have any similar problems here? Doesn't look like it so far. It looks like this one's okay. I may end up sanding over here. We have, you can actually see where the bilge paint wasn't installed very well right here. So you can actually see some of the polyester resin, but there's no splitting or anything, even down the joints here. So the question here is, would you also do this side? under the assumption that what happened to the right side, or this side here, it'll happen on this side. It's possible. It really depends on how mechanically inclined you are. For me to pull the motor out and get to this side, it didn't take very long. I mean, I pulled the motor out. I know for you all watching, it looked probably like, you know, a minute. But for me, it takes about, I can do it in about 2 hours. I can get the whole motor out, no problem. So likely I'll probably not do it, and only because, like I said, there's no problem here. But this one for sure had a lot of movement, and yeah, that's a bit of a problem. So what we want to do is, it did, and it had rained a few days ago, and this wood in here was pretty bad. And what this device is it measures water content. It's a pretty fancy little tool, but you can find these on Amazon. And then you just want to make sure you set it for the wood setting here, which we do. And if you turn around, look, what you really want to see in here is somewhere between 10 to 11.9%, which they qualify as low. Also kind of depends on where you live. Where we are here, there is a lot of humidity in the air, so I'm going to expect a little bit of moisture in here. Now keep in mind, it's been like 90 degrees for the past 2 days, so a lot of the surface wood is going to be dry, and you really have to get these needles in here to get any real reading. Okay, I got about 7% on the surface. We're gonna have to strip this fiberglass out to get a really good reading. It's the only way to do it. The question is how much, right? And like I said, this is 1708 along the edge, so this is pretty structurally sound. I'll likely take it down until maybe like halfway. I'll probably do half. All right, and then where the decking meets here, this looks like 1708 on top up here, so I'll probably cut right down the middle, and I'll draw it out when we make this repair. If it looks like it's delaminating more and more as I cut it, I'll probably remove even more, but I'm gonna likely start right down the middle where these holes are, and this will allow me to kind of inspect the wood and make sure everything's okay. But yeah, this is kind of a disappointment. A lot of people with these boats is they'll leave these alone and they won't do anything, and the water comes from the front and gets right in there, and it will eventually rot every piece of the wood in here. Yeah, that sounds really solid. Caught this one early. Okay. Well, first and foremost, let's go ahead and get that exhaust manifold off first, and then we will draw out what all needs to be repaired in here. Got the exhaust manifold out of the way now, and you can see I've started to make marks, so when I get my oscillating saw going, I know where and what to cut out, kind of like a surgeon does before he works on a patient. Same type of deal. And this is probably the easiest part, is using the oscillating blade. The harder part is when I start doing the grinding. And if you see my prior videos, grinding is so terrible. It gets all over everything. It makes a mess. You got to have all kinds of gear to keep yourself safe. And let's talk about that real quick while I'm thinking about it. Is before you start grinding, I saw there's a guy on YouTube who rebuilds boats. Not myself, but you should see him. Like he does not have the right type of protective gear on. So we're gonna go over that again, and something I commonly do on my videos, and we'll just do it again. Make sure you got an all-purpose coverall like you see here. This is like 20 bucks. The other thing you're gonna need is a full face mask. The other guy I was referring to on YouTube who does boat rebuilds, he doesn't use a full face mask. He just has the one for your nose and mouth, and that's completely reckless. If you've done this enough times, you've done enough rebuilds. If you don't have your entire face covered when you're working in here, especially when you're grinding, oh my gosh, you are going to be so sorry afterwards, because it's bad. This is my mask. I've been using it for years, and I use the MSA cartridges on it. Works great, especially if you're around different types of boat rebuilding chemicals. It makes a huge difference. So for starters, those are like the two main things. So if you're watching this video saying, hey, I want to rebuild my boat, or I got cracks like this on mine, I'm going to be doing the same thing. If you don't have the right gear, don't bother. Don't even try to consider doing it. Then you need gloves. And then what I actually do is I tape all the points, like where my gloves meet the coveralls, and I also tape up here. This one I believe has a hood. This one looks like it doesn't, but a lot of these actually have hoods, and the ones that have hoods then makes it better, because you'll have a full head covering. And since this one doesn't, I thought it did. I'll actually wear something on top of my head, because you don't want that fine powder to get in your hair. Just make sure, it's going to make you itch for a while. All right, well, that's my spiel on the protective equipment, one of the must-haves before you even begin a project like this. So from this point forward, what I'm likely going to do is I will suit up and start using my oscillating tool. And I guess we can talk about that real quick too. This is the oscillating blade. I've used this many times, many projects. I'm not endorsing Porter cable by any means, but this is what I use. Have been using it for a long time, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And then if you're doing any kind of rebuild, make sure you go on Amazon or eBay and try to get yourself a 100 pack if you can. I would say at least 100 pack of these little guys, and make sure, the trick is you get the bimetal ones, because if you don't get bimetal and you get the wood blades, you will go through these things probably maybe every minute. If you at least get the bimetals, they'll last you for maybe 5-10 minutes if you're lucky. And you can see here I've got an entire bag of them. I go through these blades like it's going out of style. The other little guy I've got too, and they're not that expensive, by the way. I think that whole pack was like maybe 50 bucks. It's kind of a must, right? The other is you're gonna need a grinder. I also get these off of Amazon as well. I get the Nico brand. You can get whatever you want, but I buy them in bulk, and then always go with 80 grit. You can see here, this has had a lot of grinding already on it, and then here's what they look like new, aluminum oxide. Just be careful when they're new, when you first grind into your fiberglass. Before they have the smoother edge on them, they will really scratch up your glass and sometimes nick the wood. So be kind of careful when they're brand new. They get kind of crazy. All right, well, those are two. And if you've got questions on more of a how-to, this one is, I've done this so many times, it's one of those things. But if you want more detailed instructions or even more information, just let me know. I've got links to me doing all this more in detail in other videos. But for this repair, we're just going to go through and use my normal setup here. But yeah, there you go. That is how we're going to kick this one off. What do you think? A lot of grinding. This probably took me almost 2 hours to do. And I definitely went through and made sure I ground off all the spots that were starting to delaminate. And I checked every spot along the edge, and it looked like it came out pretty good. You can see actual marine grade plywood towards the back right there. That is amazing. That's actually part of the floor, so I'm pretty excited about that piece. But I went ahead and removed all the cracked pieces, and actually stuck my moisture device in here to see. And actually towards the very back, I had 33% moisture in there, and I let it sit out all day today in a 90-degree day, and it actually seemed to have actually dried out most of it, at least from the outside that I could gauge. And it looks like we got it down to almost, I want to say it was like, I checked it today and it's down to like 6% moisture. So we'll likely give it one more day before we come back and cover it back with more polyester resin. So, but this is kind of what it looks like. This is the kind of repair that I prefer to make, where the wood is still in really good shape and it hasn't been completely compromised. This is the ideal repair to make, but you don't always get this lucky. All right, well, anyway, I got the motor out. Let me show you what mods I need to make to the motor now, because there are quite a few things that need to get updated as well. Take a look at this guy. It's my newest tool that I needed to get, because if you saw just a second ago, there was a little bit of paint in there that I needed to grind out, and there really isn't a good way to get your grinder in there. So this little miniature belt sander came into good use, I can tell you that. And then it allowed me to kind of grind along the top edges and kind of get right next to where this transom mount is, to get around in these critical areas. And you can see here, did a pretty good job. I'll likely come back in and clean it, and hopefully we can get to closing this thing up and making the repairs final once and for all. All right, so that does it for this episode. Hit that subscribe button, like the video if you thought it was helpful, and we will catch you on the next episode. Have a good one, everybody. Take it easy.